The air felt different in Boise. I'd been to dozens of geology conferences, but something about this one made my heart race. My blonde hair whipped around my face as I dragged my suitcase through the unfamiliar streets, the autumn wind carrying the scent of fallen leaves. I was hopelessly lost. The conference center should have been right here, according to my phone's GPS, but all I saw were glass-fronted office buildings reflecting the late afternoon sun. A bead of sweat rolled down my neck despite the cool air. Being late for my own presentation wasn't how I'd planned to start this trip. "You look like you could use some help." The voice behind me was warm, melodic. I turned to find a woman with dark brown hair and the most striking blue eyes I'd ever seen. She wore a tailored blazer and held a leather briefcase that screamed professional. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed, trying to mask my frustration. "I'm looking for the mineralogy conference at the Boise Convention Center." What a coincidence. Her smile lit up her entire face. "I'm heading there myself. I'm Ariana Powell, one of the speakers." "Penelope Reed," I replied, extending my hand. "Also speaking if I ever find the place." We walked together, our heels clicking in sync on the sidewalk. Ariana pointed out local landmarks, her voice carrying a passion that made even ordinary buildings sound fascinating. She had a way of gesturing with her hands when she spoke that was utterly captivating. The convention center appeared around the next corner. "See? Not lost anymore," Ariana said with a wink that made my stomach do a little flip. During check-in, I learned Ariana was a gemologist from Seattle. She specialized in rare stone authentication, while my work focused on mineral formation in volcanic environments. We shared knowing looks during the opening speeches, rolling our eyes at the same terrible geology puns. Later, at the welcome reception, we found ourselves gravitating toward each other again. The wine was mediocre, but the conversation flowed effortlessly. Ariana told me about growing up in Montana, about her first fascination with crystals found in her backyard. I shared stories of my field research in Iceland, the midnight sun and ancient volcanic formations. As the evening wore on, we ended up on the center's rooftop terrace. The city lights sparkled below us like their own constellation of gems. Ariana stood close, pointing out local mountains silhouetted against the starlit sky. Her perfume reminded me of sandalwood and something distinctly her own. "You know," she said, turning to face me, "I'm glad you got lost today." Her fingers brushed mine on the railing, sending electricity through my entire body. The space between us seemed to shrink of its own accord. When our lips met, it felt like discovering a new mineral, something rare and precious and completely unexpected. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. The world fell away until there was nothing but the gentle pressure of her lips, the warmth of her body against mine, and the cool autumn breeze wrapping around us both. We pulled apart slowly, both a little breathless. Ariana tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, her touch lingering on my cheek. Below us, the city hummed with life, but up here, we'd created our own private universe. "I should probably prepare for tomorrow's presentation," I whispered, not wanting to break the spell but knowing we both had early sessions. "Let me walk you to your hotel," she offered, her fingers intertwining with mine. As we made our way through the quiet streets, I couldn't help but think that getting lost in Boise might have been the best mistake I'd ever made. Morning came too quickly. I stood at the podium, adjusting my presentation slides on volcanic mineral formations while trying not to search the crowd for Ariana's face. The conference hall buzzed with pre-session chatter, coffee cups clutched in eager hands. Just as I began speaking, I saw her slip into the back row. She wore a navy dress that made her blue eyes even more striking. Our gazes met briefly, and I nearly lost my place in the presentation. I forced myself to look away, focusing instead on the complex crystalline structures projected behind me. The questions afterward were engaging, but I found myself watching Ariana's reactions more than the actual questioners. She nodded at my responses, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather-bound journal. When the session ended, she disappeared before I could catch her eye. 2 hours later, I sat in the audience for her presentation on gemstone authentication techniques. Ariana commanded the room with a quiet confidence that made my breath catch. Her hands moved gracefully as she demonstrated the use of specialized equipment, and I remembered how those same hands had felt against my skin the night before. "The key to identifying synthetic gems," she was saying, "lies in understanding their growth patterns." Her presentation slides showed magnificent close-up images of crystal structures, each one like abstract art. Natural stones tell stories of pressure, time, and geological forces. Lab-created gems have their own tales to tell. During the lunch break, I found her at a corner table in the conference center's cafe. She'd saved me a seat, her briefcase occupying the chair until I arrived. The table offered a view of the Boise River winding through the city. "Brilliant presentation," I said, sliding into the chair. "Your passion for the subject really shows," says the woman who made volcanic mineralogy sound like a thriller novel. Her smile was warm, private. "I especially loved your theory about pressure-induced formation patterns." We talked shop, discussing the intersection of our fields. Her expertise in gemology complemented my research perfectly. As we shared a plate of mediocre conference center cookies, our conversation drifted from professional to personal. "What made you choose gemology?" I asked, watching her methodically break a cookie into precise pieces. "I always loved puzzles," she replied, pushing half the cookie toward me. "Each stone is a mystery to solve. The inclusions, the color variations, the way light plays through the crystal structure, they're all clues." Her eyes lit up as she spoke. "What about you? What drew you to mineralogy?" The afternoon sessions flew by in a blur of PowerPoint presentations and academic discussions. By evening, we found ourselves at a small wine bar a few blocks from the conference center. The intimate lighting and quiet jazz created a cocoon around our corner table. "I never expected to find someone who gets as excited about crystal formations as I do," Ariana admitted, swirling her wine glass. The red liquid caught the light like a fine ruby. "Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about mineral compositions," I laughed. "My last girlfriend used to call it my rock talk." "Their loss," Ariana said softly. Her knee brushed against mine under the table. "I could listen to you talk about formations all night." We shared stories of field research gone wrong. My tent flooding in Iceland, her close encounter with a mountain lion in Montana. Each tale brought us closer, building layers of understanding like the very minerals we studied. As we walked back to our hotels, the city lights played across Ariana's face, highlighting her cheekbones, the curve of her jaw. We stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. "Join me for dinner tomorrow?" she asked. "I know a place away from the conference crowd. They serve amazing Idaho trout." "I'd love to," I replied, realizing I'd say yes to just about anything she suggested. The crosswalk signal changed, but neither of us moved. The night air hummed with possibility. "Good night, Penelope," she whispered, her lips brushing my cheek. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, touching the spot where her kiss still lingered. I watched her disappear around the corner, already counting the hours until tomorrow. The conference had 2 more days to go, but somehow I knew my life had already changed course, like a crystal finding its perfect growth pattern. The next day's conference sessions felt like background noise. Ariana had suggested exploring some local mineral deposits she'd heard about on the outskirts of Boise. We met early, the morning air crisp and promising. She'd traded her professional attire for hiking boots and cargo pants, looking somehow even more beautiful in casual wear. "There's an old quarry about 20 minutes from here," she explained as we drove in her rental car. "The geology department at Boise State mentioned some interesting formations." Her hands moved confidently over the steering wheel, and I found myself watching them, remembering their gentle touch. The quarry was a hidden gem, walls of exposed rock rising around us in layers of earth-toned striations. We walked close together, our shoulders occasionally brushing as we examined different rock faces. Ariana's knowledge of local geology impressed me. She'd clearly done her research before suggesting this expedition. "Look at this," I called out, spotting an unusual crystal formation. Ariana came over, leaning close to examine it. Her breath tickled my ear as she peered at the specimen. The proximity made my heart race faster than the morning's hike had. Dark clouds gathered overhead as we worked our way deeper into the quarry. The first drops fell just as we discovered a particularly interesting vein of minerals. Within minutes, the sprinkle turned into a downpour. "Over there," Ariana pointed to a small equipment shed. We ran, laughing, our boots splashing through quickly forming puddles. The shed was unlocked, and we ducked inside just as thunder rolled overhead. The space was tight, barely big enough for the old equipment it housed, and 2 rain-soaked geologists. Water dripped from Ariana's hair, tracing paths down her neck. She reached up to brush a wet strand of hair from my face, her touch lingering. You know, she said softly, I've been thinking about kissing you again since last night. Her eyes met mine in the dim light filtering through the shed's dirty windows. I closed the distance between us. This kiss was different from our first, less tentative, more urgent. Her lips were soft but insistent against mine, her hands tangling in my wet hair. The storm outside faded away, replaced by the sound of our quickening breaths. We broke apart at another crack of thunder, both slightly breathless. Ariana's eyes had darkened, matching the storm clouds outside. The small space felt charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the weather. Tell me about your last relationship, she said suddenly, her fingers intertwined with mine. The question surprised me, but the intimacy of the moment made honesty feel natural. 2 years with another scientist, I admitted. She was brilliant but married to her research. We barely saw each other the last 6 months. I squeezed Ariana's hand. What about you? 3 years with my college sweetheart, she replied. Ended when she took a job in Europe. Neither of us wanted long distance. She paused, her thumb tracing patterns on my palm. I've been careful about getting involved with anyone since then. The rain drummed on the metal roof as we shared more stories. About relationships, about the challenges of being women in our field, about the moments that had shaped us. Each revelation brought us closer, both physically and emotionally. When the storm finally passed, the quarry glistened with fresh rain. Afternoon sun broke through the clouds, making water droplets sparkle like the gems we studied. We emerged from the shed, our clothes still damp but our hearts lighter. That evening, in Ariana's hotel room, we made love for the first time. It was slow and tender, a careful exploration like the work we did in the field. Her skin was soft under my hands, her sighs more beautiful than any crystal song. We took our time, mapping each other's bodies with the same attention we gave to mineral specimens. Afterward, lying in the tangled sheets, Ariana traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. I wasn't looking for this, she whispered. When I came to this conference, neither was I replied, pulling her closer. But sometimes the best discoveries are unexpected. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. Tomorrow would bring more conference sessions, more professional faces to maintain. But for now, in this moment, we had created our own perfect formation, as natural and beautiful as any crystal we'd ever studied. The final day of the conference brought unexpected excitement. During our morning field research near an abandoned mine shaft, Ariana's specialized equipment picked up unusual readings. We'd been examining mineral deposits for potential gem formations when her handheld spectrometer started giving strange results. Penelope, come look at this. Her voice held that special tone scientists get when they've found something significant. I made my way over, careful not to disturb the loose rocks beneath my boots. The readings indicated a mineral composition we'd never seen before. The crystalline structure appeared to be a hybrid of 2 known formations, but the atomic arrangement was completely unique. We spent hours taking samples and documenting the site, our hands brushing as we worked together. This could be a new discovery, Ariana said, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. She carefully wrapped another specimen in protective cloth. The formation patterns don't match anything in current databases. The autumn sun tracked across the sky as we worked, casting long shadows through the trees. We barely noticed the time passing, too absorbed in our work. Ariana's expertise in gemology perfectly complemented my mineralogy background as we documented every aspect of our find. We should celebrate, she suggested as we packed up our equipment. The setting sun painted the cliffs in shades of amber and rose. My apartment isn't far from here. I could cook dinner. Her apartment was warm and inviting, with display cases of minerals and gems catching the light from table lamps. Professional certificates hung alongside artistic photographs of geological formations. It felt like a space where science and beauty coexisted perfectly. I watched her move around the kitchen, chopping vegetables and seasoning fish. She'd changed into soft pants and an oversized sweater, looking completely at home. The domesticity of the moment made my heart ache in the best possible way. Tell me about your favorite discovery before this one, I said, accepting the glass of wine she offered. Our fingers touched during the exchange, sending familiar sparks through my body. She told me about a rare pink diamond she'd authenticated in Seattle, her hands gesturing animatedly as she described its unique properties. I found myself watching her lips move, remembering how they felt against mine. The coffee's ready, she said the next morning, padding barefoot into her bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting her tousled dark hair. She set 2 mugs on the bedside table and sat on the edge of the bed. The coffee turned into breakfast, which turned into late-morning conversation. We sat at her small kitchen table, trading stories and sharing comfortable silences. When she leaned across the table to kiss me, it felt as natural as breathing. "I have to catch my flight tomorrow," I said softly, running my fingers through her hair. The words hung heavy in the air between us. "I know." She caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "But Seattle isn't that far from Boise, and we have this discovery to research together." She was right. The unique mineral formation we'd found would require months of study, documentation, and analysis. It was a perfect excuse for continued collaboration, for more shared moments like this. Later, as we submitted our preliminary findings to the conference database, our names looked right together on the documentation. Ariana Powell and Penelope Reed, co-discoverers of what might be a completely new mineral formation. "What should we name it?" she asked, her shoulder pressed against mine as we looked at the computer screen. The question held weight beyond just the scientific classification. "Let's wait until we're sure what we've found," I replied, turning to face her. "Some discoveries need time to be properly understood." She smiled, understanding my meaning. "Time," she repeated, leaning in to kiss me softly. I liked the sound of that. The rest of the day passed in a blur of data entry and preliminary analysis. But beneath the professional exterior, every shared glance carried the promise of something more. We were discovering something rare and precious, both in the rocks we studied and in the space between our hearts. Back in my Boise apartment, I was still riding the high of our mineral discovery. 2 weeks had passed since the conference, but Ariana and I talked daily, sharing research notes and private moments over video calls. The preliminary analysis of our samples looked promising. We might have actually found something new. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plain white envelope, no return address, just my name typed in stark black letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper carried a message in the same mechanical font. "Stop the research. You don't know what you're dealing with." My first instinct was to laugh it off as a prank. But something about the clinical precision of the typing made my skin crawl. I called Ariana, trying to keep my voice steady as I described the letter. "I'm booking a flight to Boise," she said immediately. I could hear her typing in the background. "Have you called the police?" The police were predictably unhelpful. No fingerprints on the letter, no leads to follow. They filed a report and suggested I install security cameras. Their casual dismissal left me feeling more unsettled than before. That evening, alone in my apartment, every shadow seemed menacing. I caught myself checking the locks repeatedly, jumping at small noises. The letter sat on my kitchen counter like a venomous snake. Ariana arrived the next morning, dropping her bags by the door and pulling me into a tight embrace. "Show me everything," she said, her professional demeanor taking over. We spent hours reviewing security footage from the building's cameras. "There," she pointed to a figure on the screen. The timestamp showed AM, 2 nights before the letter arrived. Someone in dark clothing stood across the street, watching my windows. "They knew exactly where you live." We installed additional security cameras that afternoon. Ariana insisted on staying with me, converting my spare room into a temporary office. Her presence made the apartment feel safer, but the nagging fear remained. "The mineral samples," I said that evening, as we sat close together on my couch. "Could they be valuable enough to attract this kind of attention? If they're what we think they are, they could be worth millions." Ariana's hand found mine in the growing darkness. "New mineral formations sometimes have industrial applications we can't even imagine yet." That night, I couldn't sleep. The streetlights cast strange shadows on my bedroom wall. Around midnight, Ariana appeared in my doorway. "Scoot over," she said softly. I moved, making space for her in my bed. She wrapped her arms around me, and I finally felt my muscles begin to relax. "We should move the samples to a secure facility," she whispered into my hair. "I have contacts at the Gemological Institute. They have better security than we do." The next morning, we noticed a car parked across the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows, no distinguishing features. It stayed there for hours, engine off, but someone clearly inside. Ariana called her contacts while I packed up our samples. The car remained, a silent sentinel monitoring our movements. When a security guard from my building approached it, the car pulled away smoothly, revealing nothing. "You're staying with me tonight," Ariana declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. "My place has better security, and I'm not leaving you alone with this happening." As we packed an overnight bag, I caught her watching me with an intensity that had nothing to do with professional concern. "I can't lose you," she said quietly. "Not when I've just found you." I crossed the room and kissed her, trying to pour all my feelings into that single gesture. When we broke apart, her eyes were fierce with determination. "We'll figure this out," she promised. "Together." The sun was setting as we left my apartment, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Ariana carried the mineral samples in her briefcase, her free hand firmly clasped in mine. Behind us, my empty apartment stood dark and silent, its secrets locked inside security camera footage and unopened mail. Something had shifted between us. The threat had crystallized our feelings, transforming them into something stronger, more resilient. Like the minerals we studied, pressure was creating something new and unbreakable. The second letter arrived at Ariana's lab, this time with photos. My stomach lurched as I spread them across her desk, snapshots of us at the quarry outside my apartment having dinner together. Private moments turned sinister by the anonymous photographer's lens. "They've been watching us for weeks," Ariana said, her voice tight with anger. She picked up one photo of us examining mineral samples, date-stamped 2 days after the conference. The threatening note accompanying the photos was brief. "Final warning, destroy the samples." The local news had picked up the story of our potential mineral discovery. A reporter from the Boise Statesman interviewed us about the unprecedented crystalline formation. We kept our responses vague, professional, but seeing our names in print made everything feel more exposed. "We need to be more careful," Ariana said that evening, double-checking the locks on her apartment doors. She'd insisted I continue staying with her, and I hadn't argued. The warmth of her presence helped keep the fear at bay. That night, we made love with a desperate intensity, as if trying to create something beautiful to counter the darkness surrounding us. Her touch was both gentle and possessive, claiming me even as she cherished me. We fell asleep tangled together, her heartbeat steady against my back. Strange accidents began plaguing the lab. Equipment mysteriously malfunctioned, data files became corrupted, samples went missing only to reappear in wrong locations. Each incident seemed random, but the pattern was clear to us. "The spectrometer readings are completely wrong," I called out one morning, frowning at the machine. Ariana came over, her familiar perfume wrapping around me as she leaned in to look. "Someone's tampered with the calibration," she said after a few minutes of examination. "These settings have been manually altered." Her hand rested on my shoulder, grounding me as implications sank in. It had to be someone with access to the lab. The thought sent chills down my spine. We'd trusted our colleagues, shared our excitement about the discovery. Now every friendly face seemed suspect. Security cameras caught nothing suspicious, but the sabotage continued. One evening we found all our careful notes soaked with water from a mysteriously broken pipe above our workspace. "I won't let them win," Ariana declared, carefully drying each page. Her jaw was set with determination, blue eyes blazing. "This discovery matters. We matter." We worked late that night, reconstructing our damaged data. The lab felt different after dark, shadows lurking in corners, unfamiliar noises making us jump. Ariana's hand found mine across the desk, our fingers intertwining naturally. "Remember when our biggest worry was getting lost in Boise?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'll get through this," she promised, squeezing my hand. "Whatever it takes." A crash from the hallway made us both freeze. Footsteps echoed, then silence. Ariana moved first, pulling me behind a large storage cabinet. We held our breath, pressed together in the narrow space. The lab door opened slowly. Flashlight beams swept the room, reflecting off glass beakers and metal equipment. 2 figures moved between the workstations, searching methodically. Ariana's phone vibrated silently. She'd messaged campus security. We waited, hearts pounding in sync, as the intruders approached our hiding spot. Just before they reached us, alarms began blaring throughout the building. The figures cursed and ran, their footsteps fading down the hallway. We stayed hidden until security arrived, their radios crackling with activity. The intruders had escaped, but they'd left evidence behind, dropped papers, disturbed equipment. Later, safe in Ariana's apartment, we held each other close. "I'm scared," I admitted into the darkness. Not of them, but of losing you. She kissed me softly, then with growing intensity. They can't take this away from us, she whispered against my lips. Some things are stronger than fear. Outside, the city hummed with late-night activity. Inside, we created our own sanctuary, finding comfort in each other's arms. The threat still loomed, but in that moment, our connection felt unbreakable, a formation more precious than any mineral we'd discovered. We need professional help, Ariana said over breakfast, pushing a business card across the table. Sarah Martinez, private investigator. She specializes in corporate cases. The investigator's office was in downtown Boise, a small space filled with filing cabinets and computer monitors. Sarah Martinez proved to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who asked precise questions and took detailed notes. Your mineral discovery, she said, reviewing our documentation. Have you filed for any patents yet? Registered the findings? When we shook our heads, she nodded knowingly. That's probably what caught their attention. We spent hours walking her through everything. The threatening letters, the surveillance, the lab incidents. She recorded everything, occasionally asking for clarification about technical terms. These aren't amateur tactics, she observed, studying the photos from the second letter. The photography, the timing, the escalation pattern. This is professional work. Over the next few days, Sarah dug deeper into our case. She interviewed lab staff, reviewed security footage, and traced paper trails. Each evening, Ariana and I waited anxiously for updates, finding comfort in each other's presence. I found something interesting, Sarah called one morning. There's a connection to Vertex Mining Corporation. They've been buying up mineral rights all around your discovery site. The name meant nothing to me, but Ariana's face darkened. They're known for aggressive acquisition tactics, she explained. They've been sued multiple times for corporate espionage. Sarah's investigation revealed a pattern. Vertex had a history of intimidating independent researchers who discovered valuable minerals in areas they wanted to control. Their tactics usually worked. Most people backed down rather than fight a corporate giant. They've hired a security firm called BlackRock Solutions, Sarah reported. The same firm's surveillance vehicles have been spotted near both your apartment and the lab. The pieces started falling into place. The professional surveillance, the targeted sabotage, the escalating pressure, all hallmarks of corporate espionage. They wanted our discovery, and they were used to getting what they wanted. We can fight this, Sarah assured us. I've dealt with Vertex before. They're bullies, but they're careful about leaving evidence. If we can prove they're behind the threats, they'll back off rather than risk exposure. We developed a plan. Sarah suggested feeding false research data through specific channels, tracking who accessed it. Meanwhile, we moved our real samples and data to a secure facility recommended by Sarah. The key is catching them in the act, she explained. They're careful, but they're also arrogant. They don't expect victims to fight back. Ariana and I spent long nights reviewing security footage, looking for patterns we might have missed. Working close together in the dim light of her living room, I found myself constantly distracted by her presence. The subtle scent of her shampoo, the way she absently twisted her hair while concentrating. What happens after this is over? I asked one night, voicing the question that had been nagging at me. When we're not being forced together by circumstances? She turned to face me, her expression serious. You think that's all this is? Circumstances? Her hand found mine in the darkness. I'm in this for the long haul, Penelope. Threats or no threats? Sarah's investigation continued, building evidence piece by piece. She tracked financial transactions, surveillance patterns, and corporate communications. Each discovery brought us closer to exposing Vertex's involvement. We've almost got them, Sarah assured us during our daily update. They're getting nervous, their surveillance patterns are getting sloppy. That's when they're most likely to make mistakes. That evening, Ariana and I walked along the Boise River, holding hands in the fading light. Despite the tension of the investigation, or perhaps because of it, every moment together felt more precious. Whatever happens, Ariana said, stopping to face me. Finding you was worth all of this. The setting sun painted her face in warm colors, making her blue eyes seem to glow. I kissed her there by the river, not caring who might be watching. Let them see, let them know what they were really threatening. This wasn't just about minerals anymore. It was about us, about the future we were building together. Sarah's plan worked perfectly. She helped us plant falsified data about additional mineral samples being stored in Ariana's lab. The information was shared through channels we knew were compromised, then we waited. The security team was ready, hidden throughout the building. Ariana and I watched the surveillance feeds from a small office down the hall, our hands clasped tightly together. The lab looked peaceful in the late-night shadows, equipment casting strange silhouettes. "Movement at the south entrance," crackled the radio. 2 figures appeared on the security feed, their movements precise and professional. They wore dark clothing and carried sophisticated equipment. "Those aren't ordinary thieves," Sarah whispered from behind us. "Look at their gear, that's military grade." We watched as they expertly disabled the regular security system, unaware of the additional measures we'd installed. The intruders made their way directly to Ariana's lab, proving they had inside knowledge of the building's layout. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the storage unit where we supposedly kept our samples. "Now we wait," Sarah said quietly. The tension in the room was palpable as we watched the feeds. The intruders began setting up equipment, presumably to bypass the storage unit's security. Suddenly, one of them pulled out a phone. Even on the grainy security feed, their body language showed agitation. They had a brief, intense conversation, then began packing up their gear. "They're trying to abort," Sarah said into her radio. "Move in now." The next few minutes were chaos. Security teams flooded the lab from multiple entrances. The intruders tried to flee but found every exit blocked. On the feeds, we watched them realize they were trapped. "We should get down there," Sarah said, already moving toward the door. Ariana squeezed my hand once before we followed. The scene in the lab was surreal. The intruders sat handcuffed, their sophisticated equipment laid out on a table. Local police had arrived, and Sarah was talking quietly with the lead detective. "Want to know the best part?" Sarah called us over, holding up the phone they'd confiscated. "They were on a direct call to Vertex Mining's head of security when we caught them. Everything's recorded." The media response was immediate and overwhelming. By morning, news vans crowded the parking lot. "Corporate espionage ring exposed," screamed the headlines. Vertex Mining's stock plummeted as details emerged. "BlackRock Solutions has rolled over completely," Sarah reported later that day. "They're providing evidence against Vertex in exchange for lighter penalties. The whole operation's coming apart." The investigation revealed a pattern of corporate espionage spanning years. Other researchers came forward with similar stories of intimidation and threats. Vertex's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the scrutiny. "I still can't believe it's over," I said that evening, sitting with Ariana on her balcony. The city spread out below us, peaceful in the gathering dusk. "Not quite over," she replied, pulling me closer. "We still have our research to complete, our discovery to document." Her fingers traced patterns on my arm. "Our future to figure out." The media circus continued for days. Reporters called constantly, wanting interviews about the corporate espionage scandal. But we focused on what mattered: our research, our relationship, our shared passion for unraveling the Earth's mysteries. "You know what this means?" Ariana said one morning, reading the latest news about Vertex's legal troubles. "No one will contest our claim to the discovery now. The mineral formation is officially ours to study." She was right. With Vertex's interference exposed, our research could proceed without threats or interference. The scientific community was already showing interest in our preliminary findings. Later that night, as we lay together in the quiet darkness, Ariana propped herself up on one elbow to look at me. "We make a pretty good team," she said softly. "In the lab and out." I pulled her down for a kiss, thinking about how this woman had become essential to my life: professional partner, protector, lover, friend. The threats had brought us closer, but our connection had always been about more than shared danger. "The best discoveries," I whispered against her lips, "are the ones you never expected to make." Outside, the city hummed with life, but in that moment, our world was complete. The legal aftermath of the Vertex scandal kept our lawyers busy for weeks. While they handled depositions and settlements, Ariana and I focused on what we did best: research. Our mineral discovery was drawing attention from leading institutions worldwide. "The International Mineralogical Association wants to review our findings," Ariana announced one morning, reading from her laptop. She sat cross-legged on her couch, which had become our unofficial office. "They're expediting the new mineral classification process." Our legal team negotiated a substantial settlement from Vertex Mining. The company was desperate to avoid a public trial, especially with all the evidence Sarah had gathered. The settlement came with no restrictions on our research or future publications. We should use part of the settlement to fund a research foundation, Ariana suggested over dinner, help other independent researchers who might face similar pressure from corporations. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she outlined her vision. The scientific community rallied around us. Offers of collaboration poured in from universities and research institutions. Our story had touched a nerve independent researchers standing up to corporate intimidation. Berkeley wants us to give a guest lecture series, I said, scrolling through emails. And MIT is interested in partnering on further research. The opportunities seemed endless. Ariana's lab became a hub of activity. We hired additional staff to help process the backlog of samples and data. The preliminary results confirmed our initial findings. We had indeed discovered a new mineral formation. We need to talk about the naming rights, Ariana said one evening, as we reviewed the latest analysis results. Naming a new mineral was a rare privilege in our field. The discussion was interrupted by our lawyers calling with news. The settlement had been finalized, all papers signed. Vertex Mining had admitted wrongdoing and agreed to reform their research acquisition practices. It feels surreal, I said later, as we celebrated with champagne on Ariana's balcony. Remember when we were just two scientists who got lost at a conference? She laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. Best wrong turn I ever took. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining naturally. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. We submitted our comprehensive research findings, underwent peer review, and prepared for publication in leading journals. Every step brought us closer to official recognition of our discovery. The validation committee has approved our findings, Ariana announced one morning, her voice trembling with excitement. They're officially recognizing it as a new mineral species. The naming ceremony was scheduled for the following month. We spent hours discussing possibilities, wanting something that would honor both the scientific significance and our personal journey. What about Arianite? I suggested playfully. She rolled her eyes but smiled. We need something more professional, she insisted. Our paper was published in the prestigious journal, Nature Mineralogy. Seeing our names together on the cover felt like another milestone, another confirmation that our partnership extended beyond the personal. The media attention had shifted from the corporate scandal to the scientific significance of our discovery. Interviews focused on the potential applications of the new mineral formation, its unique properties, and possible industrial uses. Northwestern University is creating a research position specifically for our continued work, Ariana said one evening. They want both of us, together. The implications hung in the air between us. I looked at her across the desk we'd started sharing, thinking about how much had changed since that first meeting in Boise. The threats had brought us closer, but our connection had always been about more than shared danger. Together sounds perfect, I replied, watching her face light up with joy. We'd faced corporate espionage and won. Now we had a lifetime of discoveries ahead of us. That night, as we lay tangled in sheets and moonlight, Ariana traced the curve of my shoulder. You know what the best discovery was? She asked softly. I turned to face her, already knowing the answer. Some discoveries changed science, others changed lives. We'd managed both, finding something precious in both the rocks we studied and the love we shared. Spring brought new beginnings. Our gemology consulting firm opened its doors in a renovated brownstone near downtown Boise. The space perfectly balanced professional needs with personal touches. State-of-the-art labs, alongside comfortable consulting rooms. Powell Reed Geological Consulting, Ariana said, tracing the gold letters on our door. Has a nice ring to it. The morning sun caught her blue eyes, making them sparkle like the gems we studied. Our first major client arrived that afternoon, a mining company seeking authentication for a large sapphire deposit. We walked them through our credentials, our recent mineral discovery, adding significant weight to our reputation. Your combined expertise is exactly what we need, their representative said, signing the contract. The commission would keep us busy for months, analyzing samples and documenting formations. The work energized us both. Ariana's expertise in gemology complemented my mineralogy background perfectly. We developed new testing protocols, combining our specialties in innovative ways. Look at these formation patterns, I called out one evening, examining a particularly interesting sample. Ariana came to peer over my shoulder, her presence warm and familiar. Our reputation grew quickly. More clients sought our services, drawn by our unique combination of scientific rigor and practical experience. We hired 2 assistant researchers to help handle the workload. "We need a bigger space," Ariana mused one day, watching our team work. The lab had become crowded with equipment and samples, maybe something with room to grow. House hunting became our weekend activity. We explored different Boise neighborhoods, imagining possibilities. Each property we viewed helped clarify our vision for the future. "This one has potential," Ariana said, walking through a craftsman-style house in the suburbs. The basement could be converted into a home office, and the backyard offered space for a garden. The house had character built in bookshelves, hardwood floors, large windows that flooded rooms with natural light. The previous owners had maintained its historic charm while updating essential systems. "The master bedroom has amazing morning light," the realtor mentioned, "perfect for early risers." She didn't comment on the fact that we were viewing it together. That evening, over dinner at our favorite restaurant, we discussed the possibility seriously. The house would be a significant commitment, both personally and professionally. "It's a big step," I said, watching Ariana's face in the candlelight. "Buying a house together, mixing business and personal life even more." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "We've already faced corporate espionage together. I think we can handle a mortgage." Her smile held everything I needed to know. The decision felt natural, like all the steps that had brought us to this point. From that first meeting at the conference to opening our firm, each choice had led us closer together. Our assistant researchers took the news of our planned move well. The new house would provide space for a proper home office, reducing our reliance on the downtown location. We could host client meetings there, Ariana suggested, already planning modifications. Convert the sunroom into a consultation space. The purchase process moved quickly. Our recent success with the firm made mortgage approval simple. Within weeks, we were signing papers, making plans for renovations. "The lab equipment arrives next Tuesday," I said, reviewing delivery schedules. We decided to maintain both locations, the downtown office for staff and major projects, the home lab for special cases. Standing in our soon-to-be home, watching Ariana measure spaces for equipment, I felt a profound sense of rightness. We'd built something remarkable together, a successful business, a shared life, a future full of possibilities. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, catching me staring. The late afternoon sun painted the room in warm tones, highlighting her profile. "Just how far we've come since that conference," I replied. "All the changes, all the challenges, and here we are, planning our future." She crossed the room and kissed me softly. "The best discoveries," she whispered, "are the ones you get to share." Outside, the Boise sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, promising another beautiful tomorrow. Moving day arrived with autumn's first chill. Our mineral collections merged like chapters of the same story, rare specimens, cherished finds, and of course, samples from our famous discovery. Each piece found its perfect place in our new home. "This shelf needs better lighting," Ariana said, adjusting a particularly striking amethyst formation. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, catching crystal facets and sending rainbow patterns across the walls. We'd converted the basement into a state-of-the-art home laboratory, complete with all the specialized equipment needed for our work. The space reflected our complementary specialties, her gemological tools beside my mineralogy equipment. "Remember when we could fit all our samples in one cabinet?" I asked, unpacking another box of specimens. The collection had grown significantly since we'd started the consulting firm. Ariana paused in her organization, coming to wrap her arms around me from behind. "Everything's grown since then," she said softly, resting her chin on my shoulder. That evening, after the last box was unpacked, we sat on our new back porch. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the sunset painted the sky in shades that rivaled our finest specimens. "I have something planned," Ariana said, taking my hand. "Get dressed up, we're going out." Her blue eyes sparkled with secret joy. She drove us to Le Coq d'Or, the same restaurant where we'd decided to buy the house. The maitre d' led us to a private corner table, candlelight dancing across the white tablecloth. "To new beginnings," Ariana toasted, raising her glass. The wine was the same we'd shared at the conference where we first met. After dinner, she suggested a walk along the Boise River. The path was quiet, lit by antique lampposts that cast warm pools of light. Leaves crunched beneath our feet as we walked hand in hand. "I've been thinking about future expeditions," she said, stopping at a scenic overlook. The city lights reflected in the river below, creating their own constellation. "There's a promising site in Montana. Unusual formations, similar to what we found here." Her voice held that special tone that always appeared when she talked about our work, excitement mixed with scientific curiosity. It was one of countless things I'd grown to love about her. "But before we plan that trip," she continued, turning to face me, "I wanted to ask you something." She reached into her pocket, withdrawing a small box that caught the lamplight. My heart stopped, then raced ahead. Inside the box sat a ring unlike any I'd seen, a perfectly formed crystal, naturally grown into a spiral that wrapped around itself like an eternal promise. "It's a rare formation," she explained, voice soft with emotion. "Like what we found together, but different, unique, like us." She took a deep breath. "Marry me?" Tears blurred my vision as I pulled her close. "Yes," I whispered against her lips. 1,000 times yes." The ring fit perfectly, catching the light like our future. Bright, multifaceted, full of possibilities. We stood there by the river, holding each other, two scientists who'd found something more precious than any mineral. Later that night, in our new home, we lay together planning expeditions, discussing research projects, dreaming of the future. Outside, stars wheeled across the Idaho sky, constant as our connection. "We should document this discovery too," I murmured sleepily. "The formation of something rare and beautiful, the perfect crystallization of love." Ariana laughed softly, pulling me closer. "Some discoveries," she whispered, "are best kept between the discoverers themselves." Above us, the North Star shone steady and true, guiding light for travelers and scientists alike. But we had already found our way home, to our work, to our shared passion for unraveling Earth's mysteries, and, most importantly, to each other.